Hi everyone, my name is Sherry and I am an intervention specialist. I was on the lookout for things that I could use with my students, and one of the areas that I find my students don't quite understand a lot about is the feelings and the emotions on 9/11. So I set out to kind of look into some literature on 9/11. I also have a son who is 11 and he really loves learning about 9/11 and like emergencies and first responders. So I thought this would be a great way for us to get him into reading some of the things and understanding the significance of that day, the hurt, but hope and unity that that day brought. So I wanted to put together a short video of some books with a either setting during 9/11 or post 9/11, so you would get a feel as to what you could read to kind of help younger readers understand what happened. These guys weren't around then, and so it's kind of important for them to get an understanding as to the significance of that. So some books that my son is currently looking into are The Ground Zero by Alan Gratz, and we will be reviewing that one shortly, well, in another video. And then Towers Falling, that is another one. He absolutely loves this book. He's currently reading Ground Zero. And then 9/10, a September 11th story is another one that he's looking into. He's doing that on audiobook. The last one we found was The Ambassador of Nowhere, Texas. This is not set in 9/11, but one of the characters moves to Texas after 9/11 and has gone through some tragedies with 9/11. The books that I'd like to review for you today, I work with high school students, and so I wanted to gear my texts towards students that could fit in that range. So I was looking at the 7 through 12 range, and the books that I'm going to be sharing with you today are actually books that would work for grades 6 through 12. I'm finding like 6th grader would probably really enjoy some of these texts and get a lot out of them. The first book that we're going to talk about today is The Memory of Things by Gay Polisner. So this book starts on 9/11, starts with the towers falling and our main character Kyle running across the Brooklyn Bridge during 9/11, being ushered past onto the bridge. He sees something interesting that kind of catches his attention and decides he's going to go back. And everybody is saying, "What are you doing? Don't go back. Like, you got to get out of there. The towers are falling. You've got to get out." And he goes back to the bridge and he rescues a girl with wings. This is their story of their 9/11 impact that it had on their lives. So Hannah is the girl that he rescues, and Kyle is the main character. And Kyle lives with his mom and his dad and his sister. His sister is obsessed with becoming an actress, so his mom had flown with her out to LA, and they are doing commercial shoots out in LA when 9/11 happens. They were actually to come home on 9/11, and that does not happen for them. So Kyle is left home. His dad actually works with the terrorist task force and is stuck at Ground Zero. He was called to Ground Zero to work the minute the first plane hit. So he was there through the whole thing, and Kyle is not sure as to what happens with his father. So he's uncertain about that. But Kyle also has his Uncle Matt living with him, and his Uncle Matt is disabled. He was a police lieutenant and ended up about 6 months before getting into a really bad car accident and almost died, but did not, is just severely paralyzed and really struggling with getting any kind of movement back and his speech. So Kyle talks about how his uncle, his peers, his friends who knew his uncle before the accident are now freaked out by his uncle and kind of scared. So that's a great topic to kind of talk with students about how, you know, things can change in a second, as we saw on 9/11, and how that doesn't mean the person is anything less. They're still the same person that they were. It's just they're hard to, like, they have difficulty communication. It does not mean that they are in any way intellectually damaged, I guess you could say, or intellectually affected. It's just they can't get their words out, and that is the case with his uncle, who actually is a memory master. And so this story is kind of how Kyle is going through the week after 9/11, trying to help this girl who has amnesia. She doesn't remember her name. She doesn't remember who she is. He ends up finding an ID in her laundry, and because she's covered in ash. And so he kind of has an idea as to who she is, but the ID is all damaged. And so there's only a couple of letters there. So this was a really great book to read. There were some really good themes in here. There was the theme of love, both a romantic love as well as that love that you have for your family. The sense of hope, the sense of like healing, kind of letting go as well. About how, it shows really well how 9/11 really changed the perspective of those who were affected by it, or those who witnessed it. You see that in Kyle's relationships with his family. You see that in his relationships with his peers. He has peers who have lost loved ones, and he's afraid to even call them. So this book, there was a lot in it that kind of dealt with, I want to do the right thing, but I don't really know what the right thing is, and it's hard to do the right thing. And you see that when he does start doing the right thing, that his struggles, yeah, they are real, but they are good. So it is a really good book, only about 270 pages. So I feel like students would be able to get through that fairly quickly. The next book that, and it leads a lot for discussion. So like the idea of the disability, the idea of the tragedy on several forms. So there was an individual who lost somebody from a disease prior to 9/11. There was people who've lost families during 9/11. Just how to do, what is the right thing, and what would you do in that situation if you have somebody who has amnesia, but you need to do X, Y, and Z as well. So all of those were great talking points I felt that this book would lead us to as we read through and went through Kyle and Hannah's story. The next book I'd like to talk about is by David Levithan. It is Love is the Higher Law, and this was the first book I chose to read with the 9/11 theme, and I really enjoyed this book. I plowed through it. It's really short. I want to say it's only like 200 pages, 179 pages. If you're a music buff, there's a lot of music references in here that were relevant during 9/11. But it follows the story of three characters, and it's told in three voices. The Memory of Things was also told in two voices, one of which was in verse and the other was just prose. But this one, it's all prose, and it follows three characters: Claire, Jasper, and Peter. And Jasper is the oldest. He has actually slept through the events of 9/11. Claire is in school at the time that 9/11 happens, and we actually open with her story and just the chaos that ensued, what it was like in a school during that time. And then Peter is skipping school because he wants to get the new album that just came out. So he's at the music shop and then going to school, but he actually does not make it to school. This is the story of their friendship. They're not even friends. So Jasper is a Korean American who is gay, and Peter is an American, Caucasian American, and he's also gay, and they meet at a party, and they have set a date to go on a date on September 11th, and then of course that date gets canceled. They do get back together, but you'll see that the dynamic and the relationship changed, and I felt like that was something Levithan did really well with this book, as just how that day, for those of us who saw it on TV, how that day changed our perspectives on things, and our focuses in our lives, and might have impacted relationships. So these three characters, they all end up being connected, which is kind of cool how that happens. And you'll see in this story that this book shows how the gay community was treated during 9/11, which was really sad because Jasper really wanted to donate blood and was rejected from donating blood, and just the frustration he feels with that, knowing that there were people in line who are heterosexuals, probably had unprotected sex with how many people, and they were okay to give blood, but he's not, just because of his sexuality and his sexual preference. So that was really good. The other thing that I found interesting about this book was the development of the characters together, like with each other, but also with their families and their parents. Levithan did a great job at showing how people processed things. So I feel like this would be a great book to kind of, even if somebody experienced like a hardship or a hurt or the loss of someone, I feel like this would kind of help with the stages of like just going through that difficulty and that loss and trying to find your way in a time where things are uncertain and not comfortable. So what I also loved about this book was how Levithan had talked about how he was in New York at the time of the attacks and how he really wanted to be as reverent as possible in his writing and be able to process something that was poignant. And I feel like he really did, and he included so many cultures, and just the demographics in this were so great that I really feel like there's something in it for everyone to gain. So I really liked this book. I felt it was really great. The last book that I'm going to share with you is All We Have Left. You can see I have here all of the tabs of all of my favorite quotes out of this book. All We Have Left is by Wendy Mills, and I will tell you, this is my favorite of all of the books that I read. This was my favorite book, and it goes between two characters, Aaliyah and Jesse. So Aaliyah is a Muslim American. She has decided on September 11th, she's had some issues with her parents. She has decided on September 11th that she would show them her dedication and wear her hijab for the first time. There's some tensions at the beginning in her relationship with her parents, and she ends up at the World Trade Center on 9/11/2001, just before the towers fall, until the towers fall. And so you see her story, and then so every chapter is different. So the first story is Aaliyah's, the second chapter is Jesse, or the second voice is Jesse. And Jesse, her voice comes 15 years after 9/11. Her brother was in the towers when they fell, and he did not make it. So this story went back and forth, and I felt like with this story, where some books I've read, when you go back and forth, they might cut the chapters a little short, a little quickly. This, I felt, did justice and knew when to break into the next voice, and I felt like that was wonderfully done by Wendy Mills. This book has so much to talk about. This would probably be my first pick for my classroom, because it talks about how there were just Muslims who lived here, and they were affected simply because of who they were. They were treated differently because of who they were after 9/11, but also just the what is this? Like, people didn't understand the culture, the beliefs before 9/11. It was like, what is that? Why is that person wearing that hijab? So I felt like that was something that was really, really well done, is sharing that input as to prior to 9/11. And then Jessie's story about how her family is, I'm just going to say, dysfunctional. They're dealing with the loss of their son, or rather choosing not to deal with the loss of their son. and they are dealing with grief. I feel like that was something that students could really learn from, is just the stages of grief and how we all deal with grief or choose not to deal with grief. Jessie ends up with the wrong crowd and gets into some trouble. So I feel like students could definitely talk about times where they might have left one friend group and went to a different friend group. I feel like the demographics in this book, there were so many. One of Jessie's friends was Japanese, one of her friends was African American. So you have a lot of different viewpoints here, things that you can talk about. Jessie ends up making a big mistake, and it ends up hurting those friendships, even as she's wanting to rebuild those friendships that she had rejected for the other group. That got her into a lot of trouble. And so she has to go through a rebuilding process and rebuilding that trust. So you could easily talk about friendship and what does that mean, and what does that look like when you go and you stab somebody in their back or in their face. In Jessie's case, I felt like students could really get an idea as to the tragedy of the day, the chaos of the day, because when you read Aaliyah's story, you'll see just the emotions that are in there, the fear, the needing to help somebody, but this is chaos. Like, how do we even get out of these towers, or will we even make it? We don't even know, and how scary it must have been in those towers. I feel like because students aren't necessarily aware as to just the tragedy that fell on us that day, it would be something that they could get a little bit more of an idea as to what America experienced that day. Not just the tragedy, the devastation, the shock, the fear, the calamity, but also that sense of patriotism, that sense of unity, that sense of hope, the idea that we decided to come together to never forget. Actually, in all three of these books, I found that to be something that was predominant. Like, you could always see the sense of unity in those three books, and the sense of hope, a sense of a renewed perspective and renewed mind, of what it's going to be like for healing. So I felt like those were all themes that these three books can really help with. In these two books, I felt like there was a chance to talk about students, the importance of taking a stand against something that is not right, or ways that people are treated just because of who they are. So I felt like that was something super important that would be a great topic for students to talk about. I also felt like all three of these books were able to portray all of the emotions of that day, including the what just happened mindset, but all of them offered a sense of hope in the end. Each of them left you thinking, how did I treat this person before they left, and now I don't know where they are. That idea that you never know when you're going to say your last goodbye to somebody. And I feel like that's something that all of these books did really, really well. So that is my review of 3 books for grades 7 through 12, or a great book club discussion for books with the 9/11 theme. Like I said, some of these are during 9/11, some of them are after 9/11, and this one goes back and forth. Both of these are during. The predominant stories in all of them is the sense of tragedy, but hope amidst the tragedy. So I highly recommend. Thanks for watching.